Hey guys, I'm going to show you how to make some cool buttons. Check these out. You hover and they kind of morph into some fun shapes. So if you ask a web dev, how is it made? They'll definitely say JavaScript. But what's this? No JavaScript. If you go back to them, they'll certainly say something with funky CSS. But what's this? No CSS. Well, yeah, there's CSS. But you gotta scroll down, and if you look at it carefully, you'll notice there's only one hover effect, and it's literally just for the color. So that's what's giving it the purple. So one last time, you really want to know how it's done, you'll have to look into the HTML, and you'll notice there's 4 buttons, and each of them have an SVG inside that button, and it's kind of long. And so we're going to break down the SVG itself. But first, let me just remove the trick. And it looks pretty simple. You got your button, you got an SVG inside it with one path. But the trick is these 2 animate tags, and we'll break down what everything does inside them. But essentially, we give a trigger of like a mouse over and a mouse out. That's how it kind of morphs from one shape to another. All right, so let's break down each attribute. First, we start with attribute name, and it's D, and that pretty much means that this animation is targeting the D attribute, which is really like the drawing instructions. I think it stands for data, but definition or something. But for all purposes, it's pretty much targeting the path. Then you got dur, or duration, of 0.2 seconds. And let's say we made that longer, like 3 seconds. Let's refresh this. The animation goes for a lot longer, right? So let's just go back. When you do hover animations, generally you want it to be pretty snappy. That's why we got the 0.2. Values. This is pretty much where the magic happens. It has an initial path and an end state path. And so if you look in the middle, you'll notice that there's this semicolon right there. So that splits the 2 paths. There are some rules to how you draw up these paths, especially because you have an initial and an end state, and they both pretty much need to have corresponding anchors. So like the starting anchor right here pretty much needs to match the starting anchor for the end state path. And there needs to be like the same number of paths. Each path has to have like the same order. So for like instance, we're starting in the top left. The next anchor that we describe is the top right and clockwise. Well, you can't go the opposite way. You can't describe the top left and then go to the bottom. They both need to correspond to the same order and the same type. So these anchors are just coordinates. You'll notice these are rounded, so these coordinates have curves. If you're going to have curves in your points, both the corresponding initial and end state paths need to use curves. Next, we got the attribute calc mode. By default, it's linear. By giving it a value of spline, we allow eases, so you can ease in and out of the animation. And we do that with the attribute keysplines. And instead of explaining that to you, because it's kind of confusing, I'll drop a link in. Play with this curve, create eases, ease in, ease out, stuff like that. And it will be so much easier just like create the value yourself. Begin. I quickly glazed over this, explaining this is the trigger, but by default, the value is 0 seconds. And essentially, when you load the SVG with the 0 seconds, it will just trigger the animation instantly. You could have a value of like 2 seconds, so there'll be a 2-second delay before the animation begins. Negative numbers are allowed, and I use them when making like preloader, like the spinners. Maybe we have 3 elements that are bouncing and they there's a little sequence that are staggered. You could use a negative value to like start them earlier than the next element. Fill, freeze. So fill is generally like for the color of the SVG, but it's for elements like path, circle, rect. So fill is different in this case. For animate, fill equals freeze pretty much means that it's going to hold the end state. By default, when you do the animation, it animates from the initial state to the end state, and then it goes back to the initial state for some reason, but this is how we fix that. And so we'll end where the animation ends. And restart when not active essentially is how we get it from not triggering the animation multiple times while it's already animating. So like, it's not going to happen in this case because our duration is very, very short. But say you have a 2-second animation, you hover on and out, hover on and out within those 2 seconds. Generally, it would restart the animation all over again. This prevents that from happening. So that's the secret to making these wacky buttons. So hopefully that helped you learn how to make some wacky buttons, and I hope you enjoyed. Catch you next time.